Right. So the first thing we want to talk about is the whole Exynos versus Qualcomm. To give people some background, traditionally Samsung devices will have pretty much exactly the same hardware, almost I'd say 90% there, but the one difference based on your region is the chipset, the thing that's powering the device. So traditionally it's Exynos for European and Asian regions, and then there is the Qualcomm version for the US. And I'd say pretty much consistently over the past few years, Qualcomm has always exceeded Exynos for quite some time. But this year, things do seem to be a little bit different. So the Samsung Galaxy S21 Ultra, both myself and do have the Exynos as well as the Qualcomm version, and we've been doing lots of tests. Has actually done a very detailed comparison and spent a lot of time doing a gaming test. Our good friend Tom, the tech chap, has also done a detailed comparison. So, considering that you have actually spent a lot of time and we've been on the back and forth on the phone as well, because I'm still working on my full review in which I'll be covering my experience with both devices. I've had my SIM card for 2 weeks in one, and then I'll have my SIM card in the other for a similar amount of time as well. What has been your experience?
Yeah, so this one has been an interesting one because, once I dropped my video, there were so many comments, people going back and forth. Some people were talking about, other people's videos, whether it was Tom or, Mr. Who's the Boss and all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But here's the thing that a lot of people are not realizing, right? So
Yeah.
I've got the Snapdragon, which is beautiful, black is sexy. And I've got the Exynos, which is in Phantom Silver. Now, I did my gaming test, and I did it in a couple of ways. My video of the test, I ran about 4 to 5 minutes of gameplay for each device and different games. And I found it to be the equal amount in terms of frames per second and stability and even temperatures. They were roughly around the same. Slightly higher than others. Temperatures on the Exynos were slightly higher during that gameplay period, but not by much, like 2 degrees higher. So Snapdragon was doing around, say, 108 degrees, 109 degrees Fahrenheit, roughly between 42, 43. Exynos was doing about between 109 to, say, 112, so basically 42 to 45.
I like that you converted it to Celsius, otherwise I would have cut off this call.
I tried to. I remember that. A lot of people ask me about that too. So I've got a gauge that I can actually press a button and it switches the.
Just do Celsius. Don't do Fahrenheit. Let's not entertain. Let's not entertain Fahrenheit. Let's all convert. This is a complete side note, but it's so awesome because all my US friends. So we're talking David Kogan, the Unlocker, Jenna, Isarik. Whenever we're speaking, they'll bless them. They'll always convert to Celsius for me, right? And part of that is because they know that's the right way to measure
it
temperature.
is. As a Nigerian, I know it is the right way to give
brother.
readings.
There you go.
Now, so that was my my shorter gameplay video. So a lot of people say, hey, look, what about longer gameplay video? So I did another video on my gaming channel where I did 30 minutes of gameplay of a game called Genshin Impact, which is a very graphically intensive game. At the highest setting, I used the Exynos version, the Snapdragon version, and the iPhone just to throw in a third anomaly in there to see how it performs. Now, the frame rates of the game dropped from the 60 of the Snapdragon down to 51, which is expected over a long period of time for something that is rising temperature. The frame rate of the Exynos dropped down from 58 to 52. Now, someone also mentioned that, hey, if you turn on power saving mode on your Exynos version, you will see an increase in performance. So I did that again for another 30 minutes and it went from 52 frames to 55. What makes me believe is that the Exynos GPU is overclocked and, it runs really hot, so you're not getting the exact temperatures it should be running at. Then when I dropped a short YouTube short just kind of showing people my results and pointing them to the video, a lot of people said that, hey, another YouTuber had mentioned that there's a bug that if you turn on an option in developer options on your Exynos version called GPU Watch. If you turn that on, GPU Watch allows you to see the benchmarks on screen on your device, so you don't have to use an external service. If you turn that on, the frame rates drop from the 52, 55 for the Exynos down to 43, 48. So I ran that. I ran that for about 5 minutes, 6. I did it actually today, 5 to 6 minutes. It dropped down. And again, you guys are seeing the results on screen. Don't worry, I'm sharing that with you, so not to worry about that. But it dropped down to 43 to 48 frames per second. So I said, you know what, let me try this again on the Qualcomm version to see if, GPU Watch will have the same effect. And it has exactly the same effect on the Qualcomm version, which makes me believe that whatever they're using internally for developer options to read the frame rate affects performance of the GPU. Similar to some software on PC like Fraps. I used to use Fraps on my PC to record gameplay whenever I'm playing any games on PC. Whenever you turn Fraps on, here's the thing about Fraps though, when you actually turn Fraps on to record, it drops your frame rate by 10. Even if you're using NVIDIA G-Sync, you lose about 5 to 10 frames per second off it because the system itself is doing another task other than gaming, so it's going to affect.
Yeah, so it's...
Yeah, exactly. So while I was using an external service called GameBench, which is what I use because it's basically using my PC to get the information off the system, it recorded the exact same results as I mentioned, whether I turned GPU Watch on or off. So all that said, simply put, the performance is the same, gameplay-wise.
Yeah. So that was a long way of just saying that it's the same. Well, based on your coverage, based on Tom's coverage, based on my testing, what I can confidently say is that the performance between the two chips has never been closer compared to what we've seen in previous years. Previous years, there was a clear difference. Now, if there is any difference, it's back and forth. It might be a little bit here or there. Is it going to be something that you're going to notice on your day-to-day? No. I very much doubt it. And this is something that, I'm definitely quite happy about, that these have leveled up. One of the things I would say is optimization. There was one game that you played which was playing at the full 120 frames a second on the Qualcomm, but it wasn't on the Exynos. Now, this is something to keep in mind because Qualcomm Snapdragon 888 is a chipset that's a lot more widespread. It's a lot more popular. It's going to be used not only for Samsung devices, but also for the Xiaomis, for the OnePluses. So naturally, developers will optimize for this chip more and quicker, potentially, compared to the Exynos, right? So that is possibly an advantage that you might get on the Qualcomm.
Yeah, I mean, that might be an advantage, but I don't think it's even that long because it's a Samsung device, which is still the most sold device on the Android ecosystem. So yeah, and even with games, for instance, it all depends on developer and some partnerships. So certain games run at like 90 frames per second. PUBG does that, not yet on Samsung devices because they had that deal with OnePlus. And Fortnite does 120 on the was doing 120 on the iPhone. It still does, but again, that was something they did on the iPhone first, and they haven't done yet on Android devices.
Okay.
So again, it all depends.
There's a lot of factors there, but generally what we're saying is performance-wise, you're going to get similar performance on both. Now, when it comes to battery life, it's interesting because when I initially got my Exynos version, I had very mixed results for battery life. And I remember I mentioned this to you as well, and I was kind of like asking a few friends around because my results seemed really off. But then I got an update. Right? And as soon as I got the update, boom, battery life was excellent. I was getting through the day absolutely fine, finishing the day with about, I'd say, 30%. Now, having used the Qualcomm version for, I'd say, over a week now, it's very difficult to see what the exact quantifiable difference of battery life is. I think it's very minimal. Once again, Tom actually did a detailed battery test, which took him days. And again, respect to Tom. Bless Tom for actually putting the hours in to test the battery life. And the Qualcomm version did perform slightly better. Now, it wasn't like a massive amount. I think it lasted around 20 minutes or so. I would say, roughly speaking, you might get around 5, maybe 10% better battery life at a push on the Qualcomm version, but it's something that I don't think most people will notice. It's definitely not as significant as what we've had in previous years. I can say straight away, when it came to my Note 20 Ultra, when it came to my S20 Ultra, those devices, the Qualcomm versions, clearly had, I'd say, around at least 15 to 20% better battery life, right, compared to the Exynos version. But this seems to, again, be something that Samsung has really worked on trying to sync up, and has made some improvements here for battery life as well. So you still will get really good battery life on the Exynos as far as we can see from our tests.
No, I definitely agree with you. I think it's going to continue to improve, because one of the things that I think Samsung is working on is the GPU, just the higher GPU clock speed, and that whole test of just going to power saving modes and I'm getting better performance leads me to believe that they just haven't fine tuned that well. And plus, they're working with AMD for their next GPU for Exynos, so we could see that leapfrog, if you will.
Ooh, that'll be interesting. Another area as well is cameras. I've done lots of side-by-side testing. I'm not noticing a huge deal of difference. Maybe there's some minor differences between the cameras, but I think with software updates, they'll be more and more in sync, because yes, we're using different ISPs, image signal processors, on the different devices because of the chipsets, but the hardware is the same. The software processing that's coming in is also the same. So I think this is something that, yes, you might see slight differences, but I don't think it's going to be anything major.
Let me ask a question. This is for you, and then we can move on. With that whole deal of AMD processors coming into Exynos, chipsets, right? Do you think this is the start of Samsung's move away from Qualcomm fully? Because again, with these things, right? You just mentioned some people will argue those minor differences, the 5 to 10%, or even the slight camera difference is something that honestly you don't get that from an iPhone, right? Or even a OnePlus, because the OnePlus is using purely a Qualcomm chipset, right? You don't get those differences. Do you think that's the beginning of the end of this long partnership that Samsung has held?
I mean, it could well be, because the thing is, okay, so for me, consistency is important. And in my Note 20 Ultra review, I specifically said there, look, sure, I'm sure there's supply issues and everything that goes into it, which is why they have to use two different chipsets. But I don't like that inconsistency. We're in 2021, we have an international market. If you are going to be using different chipsets for different devices, which are going to result in differences between the devices, then you cannot label them the same device. Call the Exynos version the Note 20 Ultra E. I don't know, right? I'm not paid to come up with the names of this, but that was my point. Now, consistency for me is important. Whether you're getting the Exynos, whether you're getting the Qualcomm, it needs to be consistent across the board. Now, it would work out cheaper for Samsung on the whole if they're using in-house chipsets, right? That's just the way it works. If you've got something in-house, it's going to work out cheaper. And if they can manage to do that on a global scale, if they can, supply those chipsets for everybody, then it would not only make sense for Samsung, who would be saving a lot of money, potentially passing on some of those savings to the consumers. I'm just saying, possibly. Yeah. But it would also be better for consumers, because then you've got consistency across the board. So whether you sit in the US, whether you sit in the UK, and again, I want to emphasize that this is 2021. It's not like you're never going to come across other people who use the same device but are getting different results. You've got guys like us who do test devices from different markets and put them up against each other to show you, the consumers, what you're paying for, and it would definitely make sense. So I think there's a strong possibility. Again, I don't understand the full logistics behind that and how that would all work, because they're making the Exynos chips, but they're still going with the Qualcomm chips in the US. Maybe there's more to that in the background.
Yeah, it might be. It might also be political as well. Who knows?
Yeah, could be. There's a lot that goes into it, especially when you're working with massive corporations like this. But what we're saying in conclusion is, from our testing, if there is any difference, it's very minor. Generally speaking, this year it looks like Samsung has definitely upped the game on the Exynos side, and in most cases it's going to give you similar performance to the Qualcomm Snapdragon 888. I hope you enjoyed that clip. If you want to hear the full podcast episode, then that will be linked down below. And if you want to see more clips like this, then be sure to subscribe and hit that bell icon so you don't miss them. Thanks for watching. This is Saf on SuperSaf Speaks, and I'll see you next time.